On behalf of your host, Steve D, this is Bruce Buffer saying thank you for tuning in to Xtreme Lyfe. And now, this is the moment Xtreme Lyfe fans around the world have been waiting for. It's time!
Hey everybody, welcome. This is Xtreme Lyfe podcast. I am here today. I'm joined by my brother from another mother, my friend, and a person I'm very proud to call my friend, Ray Flores, PBC boxing announcer, TGB Promotions, ESPN. I mean, the list goes on and on. ESPN Chicago, Showtime boxing. Holy crap. Triller Fight Club, not Thriller. I always say that. I don't know why. Triller. I got to get that trilled into my head. But awesome guy, Triller Fight Club, did your pay-per-view event, with Jake Paul versus Ben Askren. I mean, you're like, I don't even know where to start, man. I mean, you tell me, how did this all start for you? Where the heck did this journey begin?
Well, you know what, Steve? It's always a pleasure to be on your show, and your viewers and your listeners. I congratulate you on everything you've been able to do, because I've watched you grow and blossom and do your thing. So, I mean, I pay attention to everything in our business in combat sports, but I started off, I loved boxing way back when. I'm Mexican, so watching Julio Cesar Chavez, that's my dad's favorite fighter. And then, hearing the stories about, Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran. And then when Mike Tyson lost, I remember watching Mike Tyson lose to Buster Douglas. I was only like 3 or 4 years old, and watching, Jim Lampley call that an HBO boxing. Yeah. And then Tyson came back after being in prison, and then watching the emergence of Oscar De La Hoya. And then in the midst of all that, UFC 1 happened, and watching Royce Gracie go and do what he did. So I started doing local public access TV in East Chicago, Indiana, which is right outside of Chicago, maybe 25 minutes away from Chicago. So when I say I'm a Chicagoan, I'm from East Chicago, Indiana, but we're pretty much right there. So I don't consider myself a part of Indiana. I consider myself a part of Chicago, but that's another topic for another day.
Was that Hammond Civic Center?
I mean, that's where I grew up. I grew up in business, doing shows there. There's a former MMA fighter. He was the former WEC bantamweight champion of the world. He was top 5 pound for pound on many people's lists. Miguel Torres was coming up through the ranks locally fighting. And this is right after he cornered Stephan Bonner in the Ultimate Fighter finale against Forrest Griffin, the fight that I think is the most significant MMA fight of all time, because it propelled the UFC to really bigger heights and everything else. I mean, it was absolutely pandemonium in that fight. So he cornered Stephan Bonner. But before that fight, we interviewed Miguel about his career and stuff like that. And then when he came back, I asked him, I'm like, hey, can we cover your fights and show them a week later on public access TV? So he got a hold of Monty Cox, who is a phenomenal manager and, still does stuff in the business. I mean, Monty Cox is a true legend in the sport of MMA. Yep. And Monty Cox brought, it was Super Brawl. Super Brawl was just in Hawaii. That was TJ Thompson's promotion. So they brought Super Brawl to the United States, and they decided to do the Hammond Civic Center. This is in April of 2005. So I asked them, I'm like, can we do the fight? And I was very limited when it came to the equipment that we had. So I sat up in the center of the, Hammond Civic Center in the upper deck. I put my microphone to the camera and called the fights from the balcony, dead center. and I really I was big into it before, but when you go to your first fight, I mean, it is the most insane, electric-filled environment, because you're like, oh my gosh, like, you appreciate it on TV, but I was calling it, and it was one of those things that I was even hooked that much more. And then because of that, I went to Columbia College in Chicago, and I was always talking about MMA and boxing. And one of my former mentors, Cheryl Morton Langston, who used to run the cluster radio stations here in Chicago, she goes, hey, how about you do an MMA and a boxing radio show? One thing I've learned about this business, never say no. Always say yes.
Always say yes.
Always have the phone next to you, because you never know when it's going to ring. Yep. So The phone rang on a Saturday. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. From there, within 6 months, an MMA promoter named Joe Goitia, who is a legend here in Chicago, goes, hey, he goes, my ring announcer wants to start training guys now. Can you come and ring announce, at the Hammond Civic Center? I'll pay you $200. As a college kid, I'm like, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. In a few months. And then that just kind of built from there. And, I was a matchmaker in MMA years ago when I was like 19, 20 years old. Got with Mike Davis, who's been around for a long time. And it just sort of built. And then I got into boxing because boxing was older at the time. So I started off in MMA, but this before MMA was regulated here in the Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana area. We weren't sanctioned yet here. So we were pretty much policing ourselves.
So it was a brawl, basically.
Wild West. I mean, we had rules and everything, like other sanctioning bodies, but we were pretty much policing ourselves. So that's how I grew up in the business. And it's crazy. I've been in it over 16 years and I wouldn't trade it away for anything.
No, it's an amazing journey, man. And that's the thing, it's a kid from East Chicago. It's like that one, that story, right. That everybody loves to hear, right. The kid from Chicago comes in, starts off, with just a microphone in the back of some arena, and now look at you, you're calling some of the biggest events in the world, certainly some of the most viewed, events on the planet. And you've worked for some of the most prestigious and still work for some of the most prestigious combat sports or even sports networks in the world as well. I mean, that's just an amazing story, man.
I'm very lucky, Steve, because I've worked with so many great people, unbelievable promotions. I mean, I'm very big. The fight business, it is unbelievable, but I'm not going to lie to you. It does have its ups and downs, sure. And it can be very political. And I'm fortunate to work with people who are very loyal to me. I'm loyal to them. And I like being around the people that I work with. It's not just, hey, how are you? We work together and then we go home. No, we're on the road together. I see a lot of the people that I work with. If it wasn't for my brother being a part of this business, I wouldn't see him much either. You know what I mean? But I'm fortunate to do that. I see a lot of these production people and everyone involved more than what I do my own families. You know what I mean? Especially those big fight weeks in Vegas and stuff like that. So I'm very fortunate to work for some unbelievable people. I learned a lot from those individuals. And I mean, honestly, Steve, it's the greatest job in the world. I was telling you before we got on the air, you're like, oh, you're busy. I'm like, man, I wish I could be more busy because that's when I got to get into trouble here at home. You know what I mean? Nothing illegal, but you know what I mean? I love working.
Yeah. And that's the thing, for people who love to have you're definitely one of the guys who, that I have the pleasure to know that you're one of those guys that loves the action, man. You want to be in the action. You don't do well with idle time like me. I hate it. That's why I'm always busy. That's why you always see me doing a million things, because I just don't do well when I'm sitting with myself. Right. It's just not a good place for me to be. And, like I said, it's just an amazing thing, that you could take that energy that you have and put it towards something like this. And you're fortunate in a way that you've became very successful in what you do, but you're also fortunate in a way, in my opinion, that you found what you wanted early, right? You seem to know where you wanted to go at 17 years old, right? Not many people have that.
It's even before that. When I was like 7, 8 years old, I knew what I wanted to do because even back then, I was glad that my parents were very honest with me and they didn't ever discourage me from doing anything. But my dad was all like, when we were playing sports, I didn't have much athletic ability. You know what I mean? I wasn't scoring 30 points on the basketball team. I wasn't scoring 4 goals. I was an active kid, but I wasn't a superb athlete. Right. So he was like, you got to find something that you want to do that is going to provide you a long-term career and you could, take care of yourself. So right away I started asking him questions, even 7, 8 years old. I'm like, hey, these guys get to call these games because I'm a big Bulls fan. And growing up in the Michael Jordan era, I grew up watching great broadcasters, Steve, on NBC, Marv Albert and Bob Costas and and Mark Rashad. From a boxing standpoint, I've mentioned this to you many times. Jim Lampley on HBO, Steve Albert on Showtime. Watching pro wrestling, Gorilla Monsoon, called WWE, and also Bobby the Brain Heenan and Jesse Ventura and Vince McMahon. I grew up watching some amazing commentators. Like, these guys are legends and masters. I remember watching Monday Night Football, 6, 7 years old. I'd watch the first half and then I have to go to bed because I was, 8 years old at the time, and watching Al Michaels and, those guys. I mean, I was exposed to so many great sportscasters that were really just at such a high level, and I started picking up things from them. So when guys are fighters and they're like, oh, I grew up watching Duran and this person or that person, I grew up watching the commentators, and I would sit there and watch pregame shows, like countdown shows before a pay-per-view fight. I'd watch the whole thing, and I'd sit there and I wouldn't move. It would be the only time as a kid that I wouldn't move,
Yeah. Well, you were in training, right? You didn't even realize it probably, but you were already picking up the things. Like, there's certain things that you could always tell a professional, ring commentator or announcer, has, and it's the way you kind of run the lines. It's the way you speak on camera. It's the way you do things. And, these are all, I mean, people don't realize, and this is why I wanted to talk to you about this, because I've had you on the show many times, and we've done, a whole bunch of different, talked about a bunch of different fight cards and different things like that. But, the interesting thing is, I don't think people realize it's not just people getting up there talking. It's, there's an art and a skill to all this that, takes a lot of work, and a lot of effort. And, and that's if you're really good and a natural. If you're not, then, it takes even more than that to get to that point. Right. So I think, you got to have that, somewhat ability to kind of pick up the rhythms of what people, how announcers talk and commentators, make their, they're not just sitting there going, oh, that looked good. There's methods to it.
There is absolutely a method to the madness. So the way I look at it, Steve, is that, let's say I have one show, a week, right? Or let's just, for instance, if I have a show on a Saturday, well, what I do is I'll enjoy it, wherever it's coming from. Monday, I start preparation. It's like a football team. You're preparing hours upon hours upon hours for that 3 or 4 hour period. Mm-hmm. So your week is designed to prepare, and I'm watching tape, and I'm reading interviews, and I'm doing my own research, and I'm putting all this together. And then as we get closer to the event, Thursday, Friday, I'm looking over my format. I'm putting that into my mind, because that's essentially my playbook. The format, people don't realize, when we're going from, point to point, that is all calculated. Now, a lot of times it could be chaotic, and, we're adjusting with the moment. But when it comes to live TV, you have a format as to what you're going to do. Like, okay, we're going to bring up this preview piece. I'm going to lead into talking about, the fact that, he started training when he was 7 years old. His dad took him into the boxing gym at 7 years old. I lead to that. We play that piece and that tape. And then I come out of it. They're like, all right, now we're going to go ahead and set up his opponent. Okay, his opponent, the number one contender of the world. He's 23-0. And then we talk about his journey from wherever the foreign country he was from. And then I lead to that. And then I come out, and then we tee up the tail of the tape, my analyst. And then that's how it works. Like, people don't realize how extensive these formats are, and how in sync I have to be with my producer, with my director. Everybody has to be on their A game. And this is one thing that I stressed throughout the course of a broadcast, even before I even get to the arena, is everybody on our show, whether it be a graphics person, a researcher, a producer, a director, a security person, everybody has an equal amount of importance, because if they aren't on their game, everybody's game is dropped that much more. So we all have to be up here, because if we're not up here, the entire show suffers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think, and you're right, I don't think people understand. I think people see guys like you and guys that are really good at this stuff out there, like TJ DeSantis, all these guys that are out there right now doing their thing. They're like, oh man, they have the easiest job in the world. Bruce Buffer, all these guys, Joe Rogan and all of them that kind of, they think, oh, you just show up and you talk about the fight. No, there's a lot of prep that goes into this. And like you said, starts on like Monday, you start getting an idea what your fight looks like this week. Right. So how much advance notice do you usually get that you're going to be calling a fight?
I mean, typically it's about a month. I mean, sometimes it could be 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it could be a week. Sometimes it could even be a few days. Like the few days stuff is kind of like, I do it and it's no big deal, but it's not the ideal situation. You know what I mean? Like, because I like to prepare and have an idea. Like I already know, Steve, like people are blown away by the fact that I know my schedule on a weekend basis from now through, first week of August. I'm running down the dates in my head. And when friends of mine are like, hey, where are you going to be at? Whatever. I'm like, June 6th, I'm going to be in Miami for this. I'm off the following weekend. Then June 19th, I'm going to be in Miami for Triller. The 26th, I'll be in Atlanta, for Gervonta Davis. The next night, I'm going to be somewhere with Fox. Then July 3rd, we got Chris Colbert fighting, Gamboa on Showtime. Then July 10th, I'm in Philadelphia. I mean, I know it. That's how extensive I know it. That way I can go ahead and be like, okay, do I have an availability here? Or even, can I get a dentist appointment? Or can I
go to the doctor, for God's sake?
I'm not around because I'm not going to be around. When can I get my haircut? You know what I mean? Like stuff to that degree is how extensive you have to prepare because we're on the road a lot. And I love it. And I think the road is, I need to be on the road and be at the events and the action and the energy. But in the process, when I'm home, I have to plan my entire week around my travel schedule, being on these Zoom calls with the fighters, doing, my media obligations to promote these events.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're saying is it's not like me just kind of calling you up today and saying, hey, or texting you today saying, hey, let's do a show tonight.
No, not really, man.
Not at all like that at all. But no, and like I said, Ray, I always got to say this, and I can't thank you enough. You're always awesome with me. You're always willing to come on, and I appreciate that so much. But it's like, you get the information on, like, let's say you get it on a Monday, then you kind of do your research Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. Then by Thursday, now how long ahead of time do you get the actual fight card and all that stuff?
Sometimes we get replacements and you got to be able to adjust. And for me is that because I've been in it for as long as I have, if I get a replacement, I'm like, okay, if I haven't seen the guy, I'm looking at his record. I'm like, who did he fight that I know? Because I know that he's fought somebody that I know to whatever degree, or I know who his manager is or his trainer. I'm like, okay, his trainer is Herman Caicedo. Okay, they train in Miami. I could put things together and I know, I'm like, okay, the way that Herman is, he's going to try to do this, or with the way that this trainer is, he's going to do this, or with the way that this promoter is, they're going to try to move him this way. So I'm able to use my experience in case that kind of stuff happens. And, there are times where even a couple of days before, they're like, oh, well, you know what? This fight's off. This fight's in. This fight got moved from co-main event to main event. This fight now is from a swing fight to the opening TV fight. And you just got to be able to adjust and adapt. Honestly, man, very rarely do I get times where I'm frazzled or I'm like, oh my gosh, like whatever. Like, I've been around the block enough, and it's like, you got to be able to roll with the punches, because if you have to convey confidence in my position, right? I think in life in general, you have to convey confidence, but the play-by-play man in combat sports and in a broadcast is like your quarterback. I love football. That's my favorite sport. Like, aside from fighting. So I like to use football terms.
Yeah.
Your quarterback, the quarterback is the play-by-play man. Yep. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm the one seeing the field. I got my playmakers with my analysts. I have all these pieces. I got my producer, who's my coach, literally in my ear. And he's like, okay, we're going to go from here to here to here. The director, everyone's coming together. So I have to be on my game so much that I know my format frontwards and backwards, inside and out. I know these guys, I know everything about them, like not everything, but I know a lot of things about them. I know them up and down, sideways, et cetera, et cetera. So that's to my degree, and that's on my shoulders, because the quarterback in football, aside from the head coach, has to be the hardest working man in the room. If the quarterback is not able to disperse the ball and run the offense the way that you need to, the team will fail. And the bottom line is you got to score points.
Yeah. And, you know, that's absolutely right. And you mentioned your brother's involved in this too, as well. So, I mean, that's awesome to have, you know, that connection with your brother. Cause
I love working with him, man. I mean, we call events together, like on these big pay-per-view events, you know, because we call it for the international audience. So, you know, England, Australia, you know, the UK, whoever picks up the English speaking broadcast, because what people don't realize sometimes is when you get these big pay-per-view events, well, that's only within North America. Like, you know, Showtime is just, I believe, in North America. Also, Fox here in the United States is only Fox in the United States. So when they have big Fox shows, I'm calling it for like Fox Sports Australia and, you know, the UK and stuff like that. So on these big events, I get to call it with my brother because it's a 4-hour show and stuff like that. And to hear how far he's grown and how much he's come. And we don't really talk about the fights much. I don't really like talking with my analysts too much because I want it to be organic and new and fresh. And because that's what you want as the audience, because you don't want us, I don't really make a lot of like industry jokes or, you know, inside talk on the course of my shows. Because if you're sitting at home, you're like, what are they talking about? And we're just like bantering around, and you get that in, you know, our business. I don't really care for it because I want you guys as the audience to be informed, entertained, but also it's like, I want you to be a part of everything. Like, you're a part of our family. You know, thank you for inviting us into your home. And I take that with a great deal of responsibility.
Yeah. And and I definitely get that feel when you're commenting, you know, I mean, I always watch the fights and you know, me, I'm, you know, like, I think you last week had a couple TVs going, right? I think I saw that somewhere.
NBA playoffs and stuff.
So I was like, oh man, I was looking at that. I'm like, I was going to comment and then I got sidetracked, but you know, I was like, yeah, Ray's getting the 2 TVs like I got going on half the time. Yeah. You know, because it's like, I can't, you know, like a couple of weeks ago, there were fights. I knew about 4 fighters that were fighting about 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, who the hell do I watch? What do I do? You know, and it's like, I can't get all these events. I have to figure this out. But, you know, it's great. I mean, you bring a lot of excitement to it. And, you know, how much, I think people would be interested to know. I mean, I know the answer pretty much, I think, but the, you know, how much of this is actually scripted and how much is kind of just you winging it off the cuff?
I like 50-50, right? So we have, depending on the network, you know, you have certain parameters. Like, I mean, you have your playbook as to where we're going to go. Some of them are a little more detail orientated because that's just how they do things. So, I mean, it's like going in one different team. You know, different teams are like, all right, we like to throw the ball a lot, you know, 80% of the time. And we have an extensive playbook with that. Other times guys are like, you know what, let's just go out and just go flow. We'll give you an idea of where we want you to go, but it's not going to be so strict and overproduce and stuff like that. Everyone has a method to what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I get a lot of creative, you know, freedom from all the people that I work with, whether it be, you know, FS1, whether it be Triller, and whether it be MLW as well. I mean, they let me do my thing. And I like being vocal about direction of what we're trying to do on shows because I'm trying to fit their vision. But at the same time, when I mean, I know these guys, so I'm like, hey, what about this? I'm very creative and I'm big on being a part of this process. So when you watch a fight, you're like, okay, they're telling stories, this and that, but it's up to us. Like, you're not dictating that. The fighters have certain aspects to them that we want to hit. But what's the most important, you know, part of this fight? And I try to find those storylines, and then we come together as to how we demonstrate that storyline. You know, like coming up for Teofimo Lopez, George Kambosos. To me, the story in that fight is Teofimo Lopez is the, you know, undisputed lightweight champion of the world, just having coming off of the biggest win of his career against Vasily Lomachenko, you know, trying to stay on top, the mountaintop at 135, but he's taken on a kid in George Kambosos, who's the #1 contender, who is from Australia of Greek descent, who is tough, who's aggressive, who's not scared, and he wants to take all the belts away from the man. So it's the old adage, to be the man, you have to beat the man. Lopez is trying to remain the man. George Kambosos is just trying to become the man. That's the story, at least from my standpoint. And then we'll collaborate and we'll say, okay, how do we get this across? What tape do we have? Because the crews work so hard, especially during COVID and everything else, and really, getting that gym access and stuff. And then I look at the tape that we have. I'm like, okay, how do I set it up that way? How do I talk into this piece? I don't want to give away what we're going to show you, but I have to be able to lead into it in a way that makes sense for you, the viewer.
Yeah. And you got to make it entertaining, right? You're telling the story, right? That's kind of how I look at the play-by-play people and the commentators on it. Everybody has their role. It's like a movie playing out right there. And you're kind of narrating the story, saying, here's what's going on. This is and the way I look at it, a good play-by-play person, I should be able to shut my eyes and not watch the fight and be able to kind of see it in my head as to what's going on at that moment and get a picture of what the story is and what's happening. Now, you usually, there's all kinds of different formats for the play-by-play, right? There's just a single, I don't know what the names are, so please forgive me, but what the single guy, the quarterback is basically when you're working by yourself kind of, but usually you have somebody you're playing off of, right?
There are times where I'm going to call an event this weekend by myself. And is it ideal? No. But at the same time, I do whatever the client wants.
Yeah.
If the client wants, I will do. So I have to set up the story and, on my own. But typically, I have, very good partners. I work with Joe Goosen. I've worked with Sean Porter. I've worked with Snoop Dogg and Mario Lopez. That was
great job on that one, by the way.
That was fun. I learned a lot from all those guys.
Yeah.
Or, working with my brother. I've worked with so many different people and so many talented individuals. And it's great to be able to work with them on the air and then dish it off to them and just let them bring their expertise and their analysis. My job is, it's like a 3-step drop as a quarterback, quick, I'm not going 7-8 drops. I'm going 1, 2, 3, boom, ball's out. 1, 2, 3, boom, balls out. You're not paying money to listen to me talk. I'm setting it up, and then you're getting it from the experts, the guys who have been in the ring, the guys who have trained the best, the guys who see it better than anybody else. That's why they're in that analyst expert chair.
Yeah, and that's that was going to be my question. So it's usually kind of like you're narrating the story, and then those guys are kind of giving the analytics behind what's going on. And that's usually the format, right? Because I was going to ask you, how do you not step on each other sometimes? You know what I mean? I'm sure it happens, but.
It does. But at the same time, my whole thing is to get in and then get out of the way. Let them do their thing. When I told you I don't really talk to my analysts before the show, they'll ask, they're like, hey, what are, should I be worried about something or whatever? They try to ask me my opinion. I'm like, do what you do. I go, nobody knows this stuff better than you guys because it's the truth. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in that position. So I'm not going to tell them, do this, do that. The only thing that I say is when big moments happen, let me call the knockout and then you can react to it. You know what I mean? We'll get excited, but I want to call that finish. Let me add, it's like calling a game winner, in basketball or whatever the case may be. You want to set that up. You want to call it and then boom, lay out. Let the moment breathe. Because especially if they're fans in attendance, thank God they're coming back because I've missed them all, but that's another topic for another day. You get that crowd and you get that pure authenticity from the fighter, from the referee, from the fans. And that moment is just held there, right? And it's beautiful when you set it up and you call it, and then you get that moment and it develops right before your very eyes. And then you hear the analyst saying, oh my God, he slipped the jab or he slipped the hook, came up and then clocked it with the right cross. That's all just magical stuff, Steve. That's why I love doing what I do on a consistent basis, those moments. And take into account, you at home, when you're watching this, you're like, damn, it's May 28th, 2021. And then you're going to talk about this 10 years from now, be like, man, when Onilio Donaire became the oldest bantamweight champion and he had that crazy knockout over O'Bali, you're going to remember that. And for me to be able to somehow be a small portion of that moment to you, unbelievable. And the fighters for what they were able to do, the superhuman stuff that they accomplished.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just, I love combat sports, as you know, and I know you do too. And I think that's, that's why I do this show. Right. And I think you have to really be good at anything. You have to really love what you do. Otherwise, you're just going to kind of be forced, especially in something like this. And people are very good at picking up on disingenuous behavior, right? If you're not genuine about what you're doing, I think people pick up on that and it comes across. And, you're definitely one of the most passionate sports announcers and commentators that I know. Definitely, like I said, I enjoy watching, and I'm going to continue to enjoy watching and continue to have you on the show. We're going to do our thing.
It's just awesome because I love what I do, because I'm a fan first and foremost. Bottom line is this: like, I'm fortunate to do what I do, and I'm able to earn a living off of it. I'm very blessed. But at the end of the day, I'm a fight fan. Like, that's the whole thing. I am a fight fan. I put on Twitter, I'm like, man, I can't wait. Like, we got, June 19th. I can't wait for Teofimo Lopez, George Kambosos, not just to call it, but more than anything, because I'm a fan. I can't wait to watch it. I'm watching it just with you guys. Like, the way that I look at things also on the commentary standpoint is you're inviting us into your home, and you have a couch, and myself and my analyst, we sit on the couch and we're talking to you about the fight. That is how I run the broadcast that I'm on. Like, we're sitting on the couch with you, myself and my analyst, and we're just talking about the fight, and we're watching what we have in front of us.
That's awesome. No, and it comes across, like I said, and that would be, think about this. Let's try this.
Yeah.
You guys come to my house, right? We watch the fight from here. You guys comment to me while we're watching the fight, right?
In the future, brother, trust me. I mean, that's wild, man.
No. So real quick, I know you got to run, man, but one last question. And if you could break it down to this, I don't know, your favorite moment in your career to this point.
Oh man, my favorite moment.
Yeah, something you're kind of like, I can't believe the hell that I'm here. What the hell's going on?
There've been a couple of them, right? So I can't necessarily give you one, but I'll give you a couple of them.
Okay.
One, because I have so much respect, and we all do in the combat sports community, for Japan. When I ring announced Nonito Donaire and Naoya Inoue at Saitama Super Arena in Saitama, Japan. This was 25,000 people. This is November of 2019. 25,000 people. The entire country of Japan was watching this fight. People were waking up here in the United States at 3, 4 in the morning to watch on DAZN, and I was the ring announcer for that. And to be in the ring as we're getting ready to start, world title fight, 40, 50 million people watching in Japan alone, mind you, much less the rest of the world. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I am here. So that is a moment for me. Collectively, when I was in London and I had Mayweather to my right, McGregor to my left, and it was like, oh my gosh, like, this is the final press conference before they get into training camp. And here I am with the two biggest names in the history of combat sports, with a raucous crowd at the Wembley Arena. And here I am hosting this press conference. That's the second one. That's in there. Number 3, my HBO boxing debut when Jim Lampley, this was Lucas Matisse, Ruslan Provodnikov. This is April of 2015. And to be able to be the second half of the main event, Michael Buffer did the first fight in Dallas. I was in upstate New York. And when Jim Lampley threw it up to me for a sold out fight, 4,500 people right there in Verona, New York at Turning Stone, that meant a lot to me. The next one had to be when I was doing the play-by-play, even though it's on the international, it got picked up by a lot of different entities, was Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, Staples Center, Los Angeles, because here we are, Staples Center, LA, heavyweight championship of the world, 15,000 plus. Like, growing up as a kid, you would always see these big fights happening in LA. And I'm like, man, here I am ringside calling it by myself. And I'm like, I'm now here. Like, you are now in this very moment, to call this particular fight. The other one had to be, and the last one before I you know, because I mean, I got a lot of them, man.
Yeah, no, man, you had some great moments. There's no doubt.
I mean, being able to be a part of big Vegas fights. I mean, I called Manny Pacquiao, Keith Thurman. I called Deontay Wilder, Luis Ortiz, #2. Being able to call world championship fights on the biggest night of the sport, you know, in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand Garden Arena, that's special because the world, big Vegas fights, the world watches and people paying attention. So to be calling it, even though it's not for the North American audience yet, but I'm getting to that point, but to be able to call it and to be able to be a part of it and to be embedded in Las Vegas as this big prize fight is transpiring and to have people paying attention to it, that's special, man. So those are moments that stand out from my career thus far.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And of course, being on the Xtreme Lyfe podcast.
Hey, true. I love watching your passion and your enthusiasm and how much you prepare. I mean, because look, it is a very thankless job, but we are entertained. I enjoy it, and keep it up, man, because I love
appreciate it. I appreciate it, brother. And I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I mean, like, you know, you can't get, you know, once you have Michael Buffer opening a show and then you're kind of the second part of that show, I think you kind of got where you need to go at that point.
That's crazy too, because we worked together on that Triller show and it was like now, like I'd never been the lead and throwing it up to Buffer as the ring announcer. So when I did that, because I like Jim Lampley is, you know, the greatest of all time, combat sports announcer wise. And I used to watch Lampley throw it up to Michael Buffer in the ring. Yeah. And now that was me now at that moment. Now I'm throwing it up to Michael Buffer, who's still rocking, who's still unbelievable at his craft. And now I'm working with him. It's like, man, being 3-4 years old, watching him on HBO to then fast forward to 30 plus years. And now I'm in that seat throwing it up to him. That, I mean, that's pretty freaking cool, man.
Oh yeah, man. You can't get cooler than that. I mean, in my opinion, I think that's like that's the dream. You got there, right? At that point, I was like, you know, because Michael Buffer, you know, I mean, he's a legend. The guy, you know, he's been around for, you know, like you said, a long time, 30 plus years, doing his, you know, ring announcing and, you know, legendary guy. And, you know, you're on your way. You're already a legend, in my opinion, man. You're already there, brother. I appreciate you. And, you know, thank you so much for coming on, man. We're going to do another weigh-in soon, I think. And, you know, I'll send you a message and we'll connect on that. But, you know, keep doing what you're doing. Keep working out. I know you're working out hard. You're training like a maniac.
Definitely. I mean, I'm still at it 6 days a week and stuff, man. You know what I mean? Right. Just, you know, I like training on fight days now. I used to not do that. But now on show days, unless it's going to be a really extensive day, I try to break a sweat early in the morning after having my cup of coffee. And it just gets the endorphins flowing. I feel better because of that.
Well, you look like you're getting big. You're ripping up a little bit. You look like you're getting there, man. It's good, man. I'm excited for you. I think that's awesome, man.
My bench press, I'm pretty happy. I mean, it's not what you're doing yet, but I'm trying to get there.
You'll get there, man. You'll get there. There's no doubt, man. You know, I've been doing it a long time and, you know, you're, you know, definitely on the right path, man. It sounds like you're training your butt off and that's what you need to do. I think, you know, more than anything, it's consistency. It's just keep doing it. That's it. More than anything.
Like, here's the thing too. I watch all these fighters. I'm around all these fighters all the time. And it's like, you know what? Let me get in shape too. Like, these guys are looking unbelievable. And, you know, we're holding them to these ridiculously high standards, which, you know, they've set for themselves. But it's like, I got to look in shape. You know what I mean? Like, how can I be like, oh, how's your diet? Well, if my diet's garbage, you know what I mean? Like, that's not cool either. You know, it's like, practice what you preach. So it just makes me feel better. And honestly, I have more energy now on the broadcast because I'm eating clean and working out 6 days a week and doing yoga a few times. So it's awesome, man.
That's awesome, man. And you know, like I said, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, my friend. I'm going to let you go because I know you got to run. I'm trying to be, you know, cognizant of your time. But, you know, definitely thanks for coming on again. And we'll see you soon, man. I'll be in touch.
Thank you, brother. And hey, on social media, SBR Flores on social media. What I'm doing now more than anything, I'm taking you behind the scenes as to what goes on during fight day and behind my day and stuff like that. So check it out on social media, SBR Flores.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, definitely check it out. I follow Ray. Make sure you follow Ray. He's an awesome guy. He's fun to watch. And now that he's given us a little bit more of a peek behind the scenes, that's even cooler because I think people want to know this stuff, which is what inspired me to kind of do this type of show with you, to try to figure out, what goes on in the announcer world that we don't see. What are all the behind the scenes things? So it's really cool to see that, man. And like I said, I appreciate you always coming on, man. Be good, my friend.
Thank you, brother. Have a good one.
Be good.
Peace out.